Hi, everybody. My name is Carl Darden, and I'd like to welcome and thank all of you for joining us today on Navy Sports Central. I'm your host, and this is the official podcast of the Navy Sports Nation, where we take a deeper dive into Navy sports. We are rapidly approaching the end of the spring sports season, so I will do my best to get you all caught up on how things look right now. I'll also do a quick recap of some of the team and individual standout performances over the last couple of months. And in today's deep dive segment, we're going to take an early look at the 2025 Navy football team now that spring practices have finished up. We've got all of that plus our question of the day and mid-watch segments, so don't go anywhere. All right, it is great to have you guys with us. Thanks so much for dropping in. I really appreciate you taking the time. I want to get to some great stories in our sports update, so let's go ahead and start with the men's outdoor track and field team. They just won their 11th straight Patriot League title yesterday, cruising past Army by a score of 236 to 201. Boston University was a distant third. The team was led by Nathan Kent, who was named the outstanding athlete of the meet after winning the 400 meters, the 200 meters, and also helping the team win the 4x100 meter and 4x400 meter relays. It was really a terrific performance by Kent. I was following the results yesterday while I was traveling. His time of 20.56 in the 200 meters broke a 10-year-old school record, and in the 400, he posted a time of 46.77, which broke the meet record and is the 9th best time in program history. The 4x100 meter relay team made up of Marcel Jackson, Kent, Jonah Johnson, and Tyler Urick broke the meet record in winning that event. Their time of 39.64 also tied a school record. And the 4x400 meter relay squad of Pete DeJong, Kent, Simon Alexander, and Jacques Guillaume broke the meet record in that event with a time of 308.11, and that was the 6th best time in school history. And by the way, Guillaume also won his 3rd straight 400 meter hurdles title. Other standout performances came from Sheldon Ulmer, who won the high jump by clearing a height of 6 feet 11 inches, while Murphy Smith and Alexander Kirkland finished 2-3 in the 5,000 meters. So great job to Coach Cook and the men's track and field team on winning yet another Patriot League title. Next up for them are the ECAC and IC4A championships in a couple of weeks, followed by the NCAA regional qualifiers in Jacksonville in early June. Next, I wanted to give a shout out to a couple of sports that don't get a ton of exposure, but that doesn't mean they don't have their own elite athletes. I've mentioned one of them on the show on a few occasions, and that's the Navy rifle team. Back in March, senior Marleigh Duncan took part in her 4th NCAA championship after qualifying in the small bore rifle. She posted a score of 579 out of a possible 600 points. Coach Mike Ante calls Duncan one of the best rifle athletes in the history of the program, and it's easy to see why. She won the Great America Rifle Conference small bore title as a freshman, and going into this season, she was ranked in the top 5 in career scoring average for both the small bore and air rifle. Duncan also earned All-America honors in the small bore competition this year, having been recognized by the College Rifle Coaches Association. But she wasn't the only one making some noise this year. Isabella Baldwin joined her as an All-American in both the air rifle and small bore. In fact, the two shooters finished either 1st or 2nd in nearly every match this year. And just last month, Baldwin won the air rifle competition at the USA Shooting Junior Olympics, and she will go on to represent the United States at the Junior Pan Am Games in Paraguay coming up in August. And by the way, Baldwin is only a sophomore, so there's no telling what she can accomplish by the time she's finished with her career at Navy. All right, now let's move on to squash. Last month, Alexander Orr and Ramsey Killinger teamed up and went undefeated to win the 2025 U.S. Intercollegiate Doubles Championship in Philadelphia. Orr and Killinger played at an extremely high level the whole weekend. It was Orr's 2nd doubles appearance and the 1st for Killinger. And it was Navy's 7th squash doubles championship and their 1st since 2019. And by the way, the mids also grabbed 2nd place with freshman Wenjing Tang and his classmate Michael Tierney Jr. joining Orr and Killinger on the podium. And finally, we're going to wrap up this sports update with some really fantastic news. I am recording this segment of the podcast the day after the Navy women's lacrosse team defeated Loyola 14-13 in overtime to win the Patriot League Championship. And that, of course, qualifies them for the NCAA tournament. It was an amazing win for the mids. They trailed early in the 3rd quarter, 11-6, before going on to score 7 of the next 9 goals to score the game at 13 and send it to overtime. And 2 minutes and 45 seconds into OT, Michaela Williams beat her defender and fired a scorching low bounce shot that beat the Loyola goalie to the right side, and that was a game winner. Now, some of you may remember that last year the mids suffered an absolutely heartbreaking overtime loss in the championship game to the Greyhounds. And they also had a chance to hand Loyola their first ever regular season conference loss. But the Hounds also managed to win that game in Annapolis after being taken to double overtime about a month and a half ago. Back in February, I posted on the Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page that with the talent the Mids had returning in 2025, I felt like they had a good chance of knocking off Loyola and winning their first league title since 2018. And that's exactly what happened. I'm telling you, you couldn't have scripted it any better. I do plan to spend more time on this game in a separate episode, and I'm going to check with my women's lacrosse guru, Cynthia and Lisa, to see if I can get her on the show to break down the game. So stay tuned for that. Okay, our sports update is now complete, and our deep dive segment is coming up next. Stay with us. We are barely 4 months removed from last year's Navy football season, and believe it or not, the 2025 spring practices just wrapped up a couple of weeks ago. So I figured this might be a good time to get a sneak peek at what might be in store for Navy fans this fall. Now, by way of introduction, I will tell you that my guest on our deep dive segment is someone who I've known my entire life. We spent quite a bit of time over the years talking football, so I thought it'd be fun to have him help me take an early look at the Navy football team now that spring practice is over. He's my older brother, James Darden, and he is joining us from Los Angeles. So, James, welcome to Navy Sports Central, and thanks for taking the time.
Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Hopefully I can provide some decent information.
Yeah.
I am not a soothsayer or expert by any means. I just enjoy watching the game, and I like the excitement. I like I guess you'd call it pageantry or whatever.
Yeah.
Compared to professional ball, but yeah.
Yeah, that's the only requirement here is just that you're a fan, because that's what makes the conversations the most fun. And by the way, for those of you guys listening, my brother and I, when we were growing up, we were raised Catholic, and like most Catholic boys, we kind of did the altar server thing. And our first priority during football season anyway was getting the right schedule in terms of serving mass, because it would interfere with the football games, because we lived in Florida, and obviously the 1 o'clock games, you didn't want that 12:30 mass, because that would interfere with that first round of games. So I don't know, James, if you remember this, but my main thing was I didn't particularly like the Saturday evening masses, although I would take them because it did kind of cut into your weekend. But of course, you had the 8 o'clock masses on Sunday, which were basically a no-go. Nobody wanted to get up that early. So I think we agreed between the two of us that the gouge mass was the 10 a.m. mass, because you didn't have to get up too early, and you were done by like 11:30, and we get home in time to watch football. Is that the way you remember it?
Yeah, but I also remember somehow we always get roped into doing that early morning one too. Nobody else wanted to do it, and if for some reason we would get tapped and we couldn't weasel out of it or whatever, But yeah, those were kind of like red eye flight masses, man. You just get up bleary eyed, and we would ordinarily just, like, most of the time just ride our bikes to the chapel, and those were not fun for some reason. Anyway, this is definitely going off track here, but I'm sure if any of your listeners, most of the listeners are probably Naval Academy people, they'll appreciate this story. It was second class year, and it was spring, and we were approaching June week, and there was somebody who was supposed to stand watch at the gate.
Right.
And this person was nowhere to be found. And I just happened to be in the company area, and the company adjutant was there, and he's like, well, we need somebody to stand watch at the gate. The gate was, I think it's the gate where they have the visitor center now.
Yeah, gate 1.
Whatever gate that is. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so that was the gate I was supposed to stand watch. And I don't even remember who was supposed to be there. And I'm like, well, where's so-and-so? It was like, well, he's not here. He might be on weekend or whatever. And I'm like, well, I'm not doing it. And the guy pleaded with me. And he started negotiating and said, okay, well, if you stand this watch, you'll get like an extra weekend or something like that. Man, I was so mad. But somehow I just got collared into doing this thing. And it was only because I happened to be in the company area at that time.
Right.
If I was nowhere around, it wouldn't have happened.
Right.
So I'm like, oh my God, this is like going back to the altar boy days. But I digress.
So in our calls and texts back and forth over the last couple of years, we usually talked about pro football, but I know that at least somewhat recently we've been discussing a lot of college ball as well. So I was wondering when you started taking a bigger interest in college football and well, we kind of talked a little bit about what in particular drew you to it, but if you could go into a little bit more detail, that'd be great.
It was actually only the last couple of years, and what kind of got me inspired to do it. I have a friend, really good friend that works upstairs where I work at UCLA. She was really, really big into college ball. I mean, to the point where she was like involved in betting and stuff like that. But it kind of consumed so much of her time that she eventually just stopped. She doesn't really pay that much attention to it anymore. But a lot of people would say college ball is just so much more exciting. It's faster. You got the band. And to me in the beginning, it was like, oh, man, there's just too many teams, too many conferences. How can anybody keep up with all of this stuff? But most recently, I started watching the Rich Eisen podcast. And the reason I started watching that specific one, as opposed to like Pat McAfee or, God, if you name any of the other ones, Dan Patrick, yeah, or Pat McAfee or any of these other guys, was because I used to watch NFL Network, and Eisen used to do the Sunday night game day final, and it was hilarious and it turns out he used to do stand up when he was in college, although that definitely was not his calling, but he still kind of has that little bit of a comedic vibe when he does his show. And, and then he's done a couple of spots here and there on different TV shows and things like that. But when I was watching him on NFL Network, I was really disappointed when they changed their format and he was no longer on Game Day Final, but he was on the Game Day Morning Show, which came on super early in the morning. But when I found out he started doing a podcast, I started watching it on Roku. So I started kind of getting my Rich Eisen fix again after that. And then a couple of years ago, started watching one particular episode. And, he's a Michigan alum. So, I mean, he basically bleeds maize and blue.
Right.
So he was talking about the whole Michigan Ohio State rivalry and things like that. And I've watched documentaries on it, and it is super intense. So I thought, well, shoot, let me start, I'll at least watch that game. And that's how it all started. I watched Michigan, Ohio State. I think it was 2022. Yeah, 2022. And, they won last year, and they were severe underdogs last year. But 2022 was the one that I think Harbaugh was, he was kind of frozen out. He couldn't coach like 3 games or something like that. He had to sit out for 3 games because of that whole signal scandal.
Yeah.
And then there was something else. But anyway, they ended up winning that, and they ended up winning the national championship that year. But that's basically how it all started. So then I got a YouTube TV subscription, and I just started kind of recording different games here and there. And there's a certain number of teams that I'll watch: Michigan, Alabama, Oregon, Ohio State. I'm not married to any one particular team. I just like to see good action and pretty good contests. If a game's kind of a blowout, then I'm like, well, if it's a team I'm kind of like leaning towards, then that's all fine.
Right.
But, otherwise, I just kind of like to see good competition, and that's about it.
Right.
So, I paid more attention to Colorado ball when Deion Sanders was given the head coaching job there. Colorado football wasn't really all that relevant. They had some pretty decent teams here and there, but they didn't gain as much media attention as this particular event, So I started paying a little bit more attention to that team, not quite as much. I don't keep track of records and who's doing what and all that sort of thing. Basically, I'm just watching the action. I might remember some players here and there, and then when they enter the draft, kind of see where they go and that sort of thing. But it's mostly just to watch. I'll record the games and I'll just kind of watch them, and based on the different matchups and stuff like that. So if it looks like a decent game, I'll watch, and that's basically how it goes. I'm not like a super, super rabid fan who gets involved in a lot of the finer nuances of the game. As long as I'm seeing a pretty good game, then that's good enough for me.
Right. Okay. Now, I tell you, one of the things I like about the college game, and we were talking a little bit about this before offline, you see some pretty weird finishes and some pretty amazing finishes in the NFL, but I just think maybe it's just because there's more teams, but you just see more of them in college football. And
Yeah.
one of the ones that came to mind for me, and you'd probably have to go back, let me see, it's 2025, so I'd probably have to go back at least 12 years. I can't remember exactly what year it was. It was the Iron Bowl game between Alabama and Auburn. And it was right in the middle of Nick Saban's heyday with the Crimson Tide. But you know how rivalry games are. Auburn typically plays them tough. And this year wasn't any different. By the way, the year was 2013, and Alabama was undefeated at the time, while Auburn had only dropped one game. They were 10-1. But towards the end of regulation, the game was tied at 28, and Alabama was lining up for what turned out to be a 56-yard field goal attempt with just a few seconds left. And if they miss, they go to overtime and have a pretty decent shot at winning. If they make it, they win altogether. The only way that they could lose in regulation was if Auburn managed to score by running the missed field goal attempt all the way back. And that's exactly what happened. Chris Davis caught the ball 9 yards deep in the end zone because the field goal attempt was short, and he ran it back all the way for a touchdown, just using all of his blocks and cutting up the left sideline, and and they won the game. The one thing I remember, I heard a local call of that game on YouTube, and the announcers for Auburn were just going bananas. It was pretty funny. So with that said, are there any games that you can remember that had a really wild finish?
Wild finish. Well, I mean, there's always what was that? The classic Boston College game.
Oh yeah, that Flutie game.
The Flutie game. Yeah. What was the one with the band is on the field?
That was Cal. That was Cal and Stanford, and that was I think it was John Elway's senior year.
And then there was the Alabama Georgia game where Tua throws the Hail Mary.
Oh yeah. That was in the national championship. So,
so there's actually a funny story behind that. I don't know if you ever heard it, but he was interviewed on Eisen's show because on Eisen during the Super Bowl they'll bring out a bunch of celebrities and NFL players and things like that, and they'll kind of chop it up a little bit. So with a lot of like the Alabama alums, he'll ask them, was there anything that you did that made Saban really, really mad?
Mm-hmm.
So Tua was telling him about the national championship game. And he had taken a sack the previous play.
That's right.
So the next play was the Hail Mary throw, and they ended up winning. So he's telling him, oh yeah, I took that sack and he was really, really mad. I mean, he was squeezing his headphones so hard. And then, came the pass. And so he's like, so we're in the locker room celebrating and all of this stuff. And he was like, well, what were you thinking, when you took the sack? And he goes, well, Coach, I was just thinking, I think we needed a little bit more room. And he's just kind of joking, and Saban looks at him and he goes, that's not funny. And after that, he just kind of like walks off. So, it's stuff like that. And then, I think it was like last year, Texas, Arizona State. Texas went out ahead like in the first, they scored 16 points in less than 2 minutes at the outset of the game. And Arizona just clawed their way back into the game and tied it and took them into double overtime. Arizona ended up losing the game, but I mean, the fact that they were even able to come back and tie the game, was pretty amazing. So those are the things that, I like about college ball. You can, unless it's a surefire blowout, you can never really count a team out. Because, sometimes something will happen. There'll be some event, some moment in the game, and the momentum will change, and things will just kind of start clicking, and you just never know. Could be a couple of costly mistakes, and they just exploit it. And next thing you know, like I said, you're looking at overtime, and a team might win on a field goal or something like that. I mean, we've seen that happen a lot.
Yeah.
You don't really see that too much in pro games, not so much as in college. So that's what for me, that's kind of what makes it fun to watch.
Yeah. So transitioning over to Navy football, last year's Army-Navy game didn't have exactly a wild finish by any stretch, but I think that a lot of people were kind of surprised at the outcome. Not so much the fact that Navy won the game, but these games are typically nail-biters for the most part. At least they have been in the last 3 or 4 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that a lot of fans were figuring on the same for this year. What I want to do is kind of look at some of the key players from that game that are going to be returning for next year and just kind of discuss their skill sets and their impact on, the system that they play within, whether it's offense or defense. And what does that say for their potential next year in terms of just getting back to the same number of wins and that sort of thing? Of course, we're always going to figure in injuries and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is we'll take 3 players on offense and 3 players on defense, and just kind of want you to give me your take on their skill sets, what makes them so effective, that sort of thing. If you want to kind of allude to some part of the Army game that illustrates what you're talking about, that's cool too. So let's go ahead and get started. On offense, we're going to talk about Blake Horvath, Alex Teska, and Eli Heidenreich, 3 big-time playmakers who are all juniors, so they will all be returning for their senior year. So let's start with Blake Horvath. In your mind, and you don't get a chance to watch him too much because I know you don't see a lot of Navy on the West Coast there unless you have CBS Sports Network or something like that. But you may have seen him play against Air Force, and then of course there was the Army game. So what do you think makes him so much of a threat when he's out there with the ball in his hands?
Well, just based on what I witnessed in the Army-Navy game and some highlights on some other games. I mean, this kid is pretty fearless when he's got the ball in his hands. I mean, it doesn't matter if he's playing under center or, they're one of their shotgun formations and how they use their option and wing T offense or whatever it's called. The guy's got unassuming speed. You don't really notice how fast he is until he takes the ball in his hand and he takes off running. I mean, there were several plays in the Army-Navy game where, all of a sudden he'd drop back. Maybe he was going to pitch it, maybe not. And then next thing you know, he's busting through the line and he's at the next level and he's probably chewing off 10 or 15 yards. And I'm like, well, geez, this kid is pretty fast and he's quick. Last fall, he had over 1,200 yards rushing. And, he had a couple of 90-yard plus runs and averaging over 7 yards a carry, which is, for a quarterback, pretty amazing. And then he's got over 1,300 yards throwing with 13 touchdowns last season.
Yep.
So, I mean, the guy's got speed. He's elusive. He can sell the pitch really well. And I think we mentioned, on one of our phone calls basically on one of our phone calls, there was one where he took a snap. It looked like he was going to pitch it. And he just kind of like did this little head thing to his left. Things like that. The defense kind of like reacts to that because they don't know where the ball's going to go. And next thing you know, he's running. He's through the line. And as he's weaving, Texa throws a block, and that basically springs him, and he ends up with this pretty impressive run. So the fact that he's able to work that option, and like I said, he's fearless. He's not really apprehensive. He'll just like tuck the ball and run, and he's got speed. He's got quickness, and he can get through the line and get through the next level. Makes him a pretty awesome weapon. And in an interview, he said that a lot of teams try to prepare for the offense that they run, but it's kind of like their great equalizer.
Right. Right.
It's tough for opponents to simulate, even though they try to prepare for it, because once you get out in real time in live action, you can't really anticipate the speed and execution at which they play the game.
That's true. That's true.
I think for Navy's offense, it's going to be pretty exciting for them, provided, like you mentioned, nobody gets injured. Yeah. These guys are going to be seniors, and so they've got experience under their belt, some maturity. The game has kind of made a little bit more sense to them. And because previously they had a couple of different coaching changes, and now they got the same coaching staff that they had last year is going to make things a little bit easier for them to kind of develop as an offense. And some of the things that he wants to be able to do is just kind of get better with his accuracy and understand protections and things like that, and where the pressures are coming from and that sort of thing. So, if he can improve those kinds of things, and these are goals that he's setting for himself, he says, and if he can do those kinds of things, I mean, that could cause some pretty big problems for their schedule this year. So we'll see what happens.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you on all those points there. And like you were saying, I mean, I think the thing that really does impress me about Blake Horvath is his ability to carry off the deception piece of the wing tee, the hybrid wing tee that Coach Cronick has put in place, because that is so much of it. I mean, there was a couple of times there where he had linebackers and defensive backs going in opposite directions because they just didn't know where the ball was going, And then on top of that, he's got just those fast twitch muscles. I mean, he basically just froze a safety and just put his foot in the ground and cut and just left him clutching air as he was off on another one of his 35 or 40-yard runs, And I think I actually was listening to an Army podcast after the game. And it was brutal. I mean, they were just basically just tearing the Black Knights apart. And these were Army fans that were doing this, And one of the things they said was they were surprised at how fast Horvath was. I mean, they couldn't believe he was beating cornerbacks and safeties to the edge on some of these runs and stuff. And it really, really put them on their heels, and they just didn't know how to react. So yeah, definitely he's somebody that is going to be a key part of their game. And, hopefully we can kind of keep him upright and, with a relatively clean jersey, so to speak, so that, so that the offense can flow. But anyway.
Yeah, I was watching I watched the highlights of the University of Alabama Birmingham game, and don't quote me on the quarter or how much time was left or whatever, but I mean, they were in the red zone, basically just outside of the red zone, and he took the ball and went to the right, and he didn't have a lot of room to get in there inside of the pylon, but man, his speed just kind of just got him there. He just squeaked by a defender. He's probably a safety or something. And he just kind of like squeaked by him and got the ball inside there. And at first he got up, he motioned himself that it was a touchdown. But, the call was not official until maybe a fraction of a second later. But I was impressed in how fast he was able to hit the edge and turn that corner and get in there. That kid is the truth, man. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they do this year.
Yeah. Okay, number 2 on the list is Alex Texa. He is Navy's returning fullback, and he had some really unbelievable games like earlier in the season in terms of him carrying the ball. This game, he had a couple of impact plays, but interestingly, Texa was involved in a few big plays where he didn't even have his hands on the ball. But I did want to touch on the first one, which was the basically the screen pass in the first quarter that set up Navy's first touchdown. I will tell you that I have never seen a screen pass with that kind of misdirection before the pass was finally thrown. And then, it was executed so well. So what was your take on that?
Yeah, that was pretty exciting because I thought, okay, well, this guy's not going to have too much room to run because there wasn't really that much turf there before, he went out of bounds. But he had a good wall of blockers in front of him. And so that enabled him to get the yardage that he got. I mean, and the guy, as a fullback, you don't really see that much speed out of a fullback. But I don't know, maybe it's because Service Academy guys are a little bit smaller, so they're lighter and a little bit quicker and faster. But I mean, he had 12 catches last year for almost 230 yards. So I mean, and 2 touchdowns on receiving catches. So he's just like Horvath coming back senior year. There's some things that he says he wants to work on. One of the things he wants to do is just position himself where they just challenge defenses more, because the way they run their offense and stuff, it's fast and it's versatile. And if he can get involved a little bit more that way and maybe pick up what some other people are doing, maybe they could utilize him in other ways and kind of make their offense a little bit more dangerous. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, some of the things that he wants to work on is just being consistent and learn the offense more. Kind of like one of those situations where if you're on a team or if you're in a group, you kind of learn what the person ahead of you, above you, and below you are doing. So then that way, if something happens and you're next man up, you can kind of take up the slack. So I guess some of the things he says he wants to be able to do is learn how other people play their positions and stuff. And so maybe he can be utilized a little bit more.
Right.
But yeah, man. So even though he may not have been hugely involved in the game, there were a couple of plays that he was involved in. That block that he threw on a defender that sprung Horvath on one of the longest runs was pretty good, because as Horvath was coming through the line, there was one defender that was probably within arm's reach, but by the time he was close enough and they were at the same level, he was already past him because of his speed. But then there was another guy that was on a trajectory that was going to basically could have taken him out pretty hard. Texas was right there to kind of like disrupt his path just enough for Horvath to kind of cut left and get behind the block. And then that basically sprung him loose. He does the job that a fullback is supposed to do when it comes to blocking and things like that. So what I've noticed about a lot of these guys is that they're pretty unselfish about their job. They know the job that they're supposed to do, and they just go out there and execute it. And I'm sure the coaches drum that into their head. Plus, considering they're at a service academy, it's kind of one of those things that's kind of like drummed into your head day in and day out anyway.
Right.
Off the field, it's all about teamwork and making sure everybody does the job the way they're supposed to do it. Otherwise, and we're not just talking about football. I mean, we're talking about what your career is going to be.
Right, exactly. So, and when it comes to Teska, one of the things that I like about him is, even as a fullback, he's got pretty decent hands, and I wouldn't mind seeing him, like to your point, being used a little bit more in the offense as a receiver in different situations. And, it depends on what the scenario is, obviously, but it never hurts. And especially in an offense like that, where, I mean, it's not a pass happy offense, but it's an offense where the more sure-handed receivers you have, the better off you're going to be. And having somebody like him out there available as an option certainly doesn't hurt. Okay. Next, we got Eli Heidenreich, another rising senior. And again, somebody who had a terrific season, and he plays what we used to call the slot back position, but in this new offense, they kind of refer to it as a snipe. And I guess that just comes from the guy who coaches him. He just kind of likes that name. And just to give you a little bit of history around the slot back, now snipe position at Navy, typically those guys run about 5'9", 5'10", and somewhere between 160 and 180 pounds. In fact, Brandon Chapman fits that bill exactly. He's 5'9" and 167. Now, add 3 inches and another 34 pounds, and you've got Eli Heidenreich. I mean, this guy is a load to bring down. And at 6 feet tall and 201 pounds, he doesn't sacrifice anything when it comes to speed and quickness, as you've probably seen if you've watched him play. But a thing that impresses me about him is his balance. I don't recall ever seeing too many guys get a clean shot at him first, where it just basically knocks him down. And even though he didn't have a ton of touches in the game, he had a big one that was a response to, Army it was in the third quarter. Army kicked the field goal to close to 14-10. That's what it was, yeah. And then Navy got the ball back, and they were driving down the field. In fact, that was their only possession in the third quarter. And they were just looking to pick up a first down. And there is like third down, 3rd and 4 or whatever. And they were just going for a little out pass to get the first down. And Heidenreich turned it into a big play. What did you see on that play the first thing you see is, the defensive back really blew the tackle. Well, yeah, but if we look at it again, and I looked at it a couple of times, and I noticed something about how Heidenreich was positioned as he was gathering in the ball. Do you know what I'm talking about? Did you see anything in particular there?
Yeah. The guy's he's got pretty good vision, because when he got the ball, his back was turned. But as he was catching the ball, he was kind of like rotating to his left a little bit, where the defender was already on a path to tackle him. So I guess from the standpoint of his peripheral vision was pretty good. So he was able to basically slip this guy. Yeah, the announcer said, Yeah, it was a poor tackle execution or whatever. But I mean, I think he was able to utilize his spatial awareness and his body control, which is what he's been known for. Other sports writers and people who've kind of assessed his abilities and stuff has said he's got good body control, good spatial awareness, and
Right.
Which was clearly evident on that particular play because he was able to position himself and move quickly enough to get past the guy. Maybe the guy would have tackled him. Maybe it was poor tackle execution. I mean, but give the guy some credit. He can move and he can elude. So,
Yeah.
so I'm willing to go err on the side of the guy's got talent. He was able to slip a tackle because he's just good at his job and good at his position.
Yeah.
65 carries, almost 450 yards last year, 3 TDs, and he averages almost 7 yards a carry. I mean, the guy's no slouch.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I see too, because on that play, it's like you were saying, he was just kind of, as he caught the ball, he was rotating his body and he saw this guy. And I just think that he was prepared to make a jump cut as soon as his toes touched the ground. And as soon as he got past that guy, again, the dude's speed really catches a lot of people off guard. I mean, he doesn't look that fast, but the fact is I've never seen anybody chase him down from behind. So he's just, definitely a huge weapon, can catch, can run. By the way, Heidenreich was also the Mid's leading receiver with 39 receptions and 671 yards. He also caught 6 touchdowns. So when you look at his rushing and receiving stats, Heidenreich was responsible for over 1,000 yards of the Mid's offense last year. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take a short break now, but before we do that, I did want to give you all a couple of ways to stay up to date on Navy sports. The first is to join the Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page. I've got a link to that in the show notes. Just click on it, answer a couple of questions, and you'll be good to go. The second way takes even less time. Just hit the follow button on whichever platform you're listening to this podcast right now. It can be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, it doesn't matter. Once you do that, every episode will be downloaded to your directory when it's released, and you can listen to it whenever you're ready. So please consider becoming a member of our group, and you can actually tap that follow button right now to show your support for the podcast. I'm looking forward to having you join us. We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us on Navy Sports Central. Carl Darden here with you, and I'm joined today by my brother James. He is a big college football fan himself, and we are taking an early look at some of the key players who will likely have an impact on the Mid's success in the upcoming season. Okay, so we've highlighted 3 playmakers on offense, and now I'd like to move on to the defense. The first guy I want to talk about is Landon Robinson, and he's Navy's nose guard. Again, a junior, so he's coming back for his senior year, and in the Army game, that guy was just all over the place. He got on the field quite a bit in 2023, both at nose tackle and on special teams. But last season, he had the starting job all to himself. And he had an absolute monster of a game against the Black Knights. I mean, they just had no answer for him. What in particular caught your eye when watching Landon Robinson play?
Can I just say, and this is no understatement, this kid is big.
Right.
He's huge. Bruce Feldman, who writes for The Athletic, I think, put him on his beast list or something like that. I think that's what he called it. I mean, the guy's 280 pounds, squats almost 700, has a 33-inch vertical leap, which is pretty amazing for a guy that big, and benches almost 450 pounds. And he's fast. I mean, he's incredibly fast. They've clocked him anywhere from 18 to 20 miles an hour. So for a guy that big to be able to move that fast, I wouldn't want to be looking at him as especially if I was a quarterback. I would not want that guy.
Right.
I would not want to be looking and seeing that guy coming in my field of view. But some of the stuff I noticed from the game is that he plays the double team well. And there were several times, I don't know, I can't count them all, but I mean, there was several times he was literally triple teamed. And I noticed that even in those situations where he may not be in the play, maybe the play is going in the opposite direction of where he's at, he doesn't quit. One of the things I've heard, from a lot of football coaches and stuff, when you watch a lot of this behind the scenes stuff, is they always emphasize finishing the play because you just never know what's going to happen. I mean, he's getting double teamed and stuff, but some players might just decide, okay, well, this play is over. I'm just going to dial it back and just kind of see what happens. With some of the stuff that I was watching, he's still pursuing. He doesn't quit. And, so everybody today, a lot of people like metrics and things like that. And so, when I heard that he's running at 20 miles an hour when they executed that fake punt and he took off running, I was like, oh my God, this guy, they don't seem to be able to catch him. But he's big, he's fast, and he's got a lot of stamina. So he's got a big motor. He doesn't really tire out in the fourth quarter like a lot of guys. And that's some of the stuff that he wants to be able to work on this year is just his conditioning. He knows his conditioning lends itself to the defense that they play.
Right.
What was mostly impressive was the fact that last year, I think, was his only second year at that position.
Right. Yeah, they converted him over. I believe he was a defensive tackle, and they converted him to nose guard.
Yeah, and then being first-year All-American, athletic conference, the guy's he's racking up a pretty decent resume. 43 tackles last year, 17 solo tackles, 26 assists.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a force to be reckoned with, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that some folks may not, if they don't watch football a lot and they say, okay, this guy's a nose guard, what does he actually do? The nose guard does have a primary responsibility of just clogging up the offensive line. And you're commenting that he does a really good job taking on double teams.
Yeah.
And he's the reason why, and granted, in Navy's system, it is in terms of tackles, it's pretty heavily slanted towards the linebackers because the way that system is designed is that you get, the nose guard in particular just tying up blockers, and that allows the linebackers to come in and make the plays behind them. But because Robinson is just so strong and quick, he's able to defeat two blocks at one time and get in there and create all kinds of problems for the quarterback, which is what he did all during the Army game. I mean, you could see the level of frustration on the Army side of the ball. And this was an offensive line that was voted the best in the country in 2024. Navy's defensive line just basically schooled them. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. Army was known to average over 300 yards a game, roughly 300 yards a game. And, with him being there, they held him to 113 yards.
Yeah.
So there was one where he just blew through the offensive line and tackled a guy for a loss. That was in the first quarter. And there were other plays where he's a huge disruptor. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And on a defense, you need a guy like that because when teams prepare, they're going to be looking for you. And something I learned from watching football is if there's a double team somewhere, somebody's left unattended.
That's right. Yeah.
So if he can disrupt an offensive line enough to draw a double or a triple team, then there's always going to be somebody that's going to be able to exploit that and take advantage of it. Somebody is not going to be keyed on if one of your top guys, if the offensive coordinator and the coaches, they're trying to well, this guy is really dangerous and he can really give us a problem all game long. So we're going to have to really kind of focus on him. Well, then if that's the case, there's going to be somebody that they're not going to be looking out for.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Navy defensive coordinator P.J. Volker wants to do. I mean, you mentioned the word disruption. That is the cornerstone of his entire defensive philosophy. Because obviously you're talking about athletes who measure up a little bit differently compared to the Power, I guess, 4 now, schools or whatever you want to call them. But yeah, I mean, you'll see blitzes coming from different directions, and a lot of that success depends on whether or not guys like Robinson can tie up the offensive line and give those linebackers and safeties and cornerbacks a chance to break through into the backfield and just wreak havoc with the quarterback and the fullbacks. So, all right, we got a couple more here. Luke Pires and Andrew Duhart. Pires he plays the Raider position. And in the Army game, he had 4 tackles, but more importantly, he always seems to be around the football. And that was the case in the Army game as well, because he had an interception right at the end that basically put the game on ice. But a little bit of background on this guy. I don't know how often you've seen him, but he started, I forget who got hurt at the Raider position 2 seasons ago when he was a sophomore. And it was a classic next man up situation. And I'll tell you what, with Pierce in there, the Navy defense did not miss a beat. I mean, he picked up that scheme very, very quickly and started making so many big plays early in his career that the Navy coaching staff found it hard to keep him off the field. But anyway, I think what really benefits Navy, good Navy defensive players like Pierce is that they are their football IQ is just basically off the charts. And I think that one of the things that has impressed me about him is that he knows his assignment, and I'm pretty sure at this level he knows everybody else's assignment, but he just does his. And like I said, that usually puts him in a position to make a really good play, just like it was in the Army game. Now, granted, by the time that part of the game was up, now I can't remember specifically which 4 tackles that he did have, but I do know that, like I said, he usually is in a position to make a significant impact regardless. But one of the things I appreciated about when he intercepted the ball, it kind of proved the football IQ I was talking about. When the Army quarterback went back to pass and he threw it, do you remember what I'm talking about here?
Yeah. I mean, it was like roughly about 3.5 minutes left in the game, I think.
Yeah, right towards the end of the game. And the thing that I noticed about it is it looked like he already knew the route that the receiver was running because he beat the receiver to the ball so fast. Yeah. I don't even think the receiver knew where the ball was by the time it was out of the quarterback's hands. Pierce was already on top of the ball, and he grabbed it, was going the other way before he realized what happens. And that, to me, just like I said, I guess that just comes with film study and just kind of knowing tendencies and so forth, because he broke on that ball so quickly. It just seemed like he knew what the play was going to be for that situation.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was a really impressive play that spoke to his football IQ that I mentioned before.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly right, because, he got an amazing break on the ball, and it was almost as if he was the intended receiver.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, I've watched a play and I've slowed it down. Like about a couple years ago, I discovered that you could slow down YouTube by hitting shift comma and shift period, the up arrows, and you can slow the game. You could slow or speed up the playback.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of these plays I've watched, and I just kind of slow it down to like half speed or maybe 1/4 speed. And then, you just kind of hit the J or the L key, and you kind of like inch it forward or inch it back. So plays like that I've watched in slow motion just to kind of get a sense of what this guy was doing and how he knew to be where he was at the time that play was being played. And so, yeah, you watch it at regular speed, and then you kind of slow it down. And I mean, it was like, I'm guessing he was probably just watching the quarterback's eyes, because the quarterback knew who he was going to throw it to, and he just kind of picked up on it. And with his speed and everything, he was able to just get in there. And like I said, it was almost like he was the intended receiver. So that could have been, like you said, it could have been just a product of film study, scouting of previous Army games, and just sheer experience. Some of these guys have been playing this game since they were 4 or 5 years old. But, as you mature and you can kind of like grow into the position, you understand certain tendencies and things like that, and you know how to play your man, just giving them enough of a cushion. And depending on the person you're covering, depending on their hip movement and their footwork and stuff like that, you can kind of like just stay on them. But yeah, I mean, that was a pretty amazing interception. I mean, I think it was just basically the nail in the coffin.
Yeah. All right, our last guy is Andrew Duhart. He plays cornerback for the Mids, and I don't know if he's a field corner or a boundary corner. But one thing I do know is he's going to be the Mids' most experienced defensive back returning, because Mbiti Williams, Rayon Lane, and Deshaun Peel will all be lost to graduation. I mean, those were 3 guys who've been absolute mainstays in the Navy defensive backfield ever since they were sophomores. So yeah, Duhart will be a senior. In fact, if you look at the top 3 positions on the depth chart for the 4 defensive backfield positions, those being the cornerback, the safety, and the bandit positions, Duhart is the only senior listed. He and another kid named Ira Oniha, who is I think he's going to be a junior, are two excellent cover corners. And as far as Duhart's contribution to the Army game, I know that he had a couple of pass deflections, including one that resulted in an interception that led to Navy's final field goal. But again, he's another guy. They will use him on blitzes a lot. And I think that he's got a real good tendency to be able to, if he doesn't get the tackle, he at least creates enough havoc so that, linebackers can come in behind him in the backfield and secure that tackle as well. So that's just basically my take on him. I don't know what you had, if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah. Well, just kind of to your point about him disrupting a play to the point where the rest of the defense can close, basically close out the play. In the fourth quarter, just under 8 minutes, he slipped the block and he slowed down. The guy's last name was Noah. I can't remember I don't know if it's his last name or his first name, but anyway, he was the Army receiver out in the corner that caught the ball. And,
okay.
But Duhart was able to slip a block, grab him by the ankles, but the guy got away, but he slowed him down enough to where the rest of the Navy defenders or tacklers could get in on it. It was like maybe 2 guys, maybe 3 guys, and put him back for maybe a 2 or 3 yard loss. There was another play. It was slightly thrown overhead to an Army receiver, but it had the ball had a slightly different trajectory. He probably, he jumped up for it and it was just out of reach, but he probably could have got a pick out of that. And the one that you mentioned was he did cause a pass deflection and his teammate McShann picked it up. And that was the one that kind of bounced off of him. He caught it or he deflected it, and there was some question of whether or not the ball touched the ground, but it didn't. And as he was rolling, the ball kind of flipped up into the air, and then McShann was able to pick it up, and that was considered the interception. Now he's not credited for the interception on that play, but I think he's credited for a pass deflection or something like that.
Yeah, he did get credit for the pass deflection for sure.
But, some of the stuff that he's in a recent interview, he's talking about he wants to really work on his one-on-one coverage, maybe get some reps at safety, and just kind of get a better feel for what the defense is doing at a higher level. Because once you can kind of get more comfortable in that position and you start seeing things a lot more, I've heard that the game slows down. A lot of these guys refer to the game slowing down for them. They get to the point where their maturity and their IQ for whatever position they're playing, and even the game as a whole, it kind of gets a little bit easier for them. So those are the kind of things that he wants to kind of work on, and then pass rush and things like that. So, I think overall, when we talk about these 6 guys, and even people that we have not mentioned, there are guys that are out there that are contributing to the team and contributing to the game, because if you watch any of the highlights, there are names that are called that you don't necessarily see as much. All in all, I think it's going to be a pretty exciting season for them. And considering how piggybacking on their performance last year, beating Army, getting the CIC trophy and winning the bowl game. So, we'll see. Coaching staff, there hasn't been any real major fluctuations in that regard. From what I'm hearing, spring ball went pretty well.
Yeah.
So when they start getting ready for the season and they start strapping on the pads and things like that, we'll see how it goes next year.
Yeah, I think that when I look at how things wrapped up for spring ball, I was actually watching Coach Newberry's press conference the other day, and his main focus was building on depth and keeping injuries to a minimum. Depth is such a huge component when it comes to Navy football, especially on the offensive line. And last year, they were very fortunate with injuries, particularly on the offensive line, and they just had a very, very experienced group. This year, they're losing 3 starters to graduation, and they got some great talent coming in behind them, but it's going to be up to Coach Cronick and everybody to coach them up, and hopefully they'll be ready to go once preseason practices are wrapping up and they get ready to take the field. I think their first game is against VMI or something.
Yeah. I think their first 3 games are at home, something like that.
Yeah, that definitely does help. So, but anyway, that's going to take us to the end of our conversation. James, thanks so much for joining me today to talk a little bit about Navy football. We'll see how things turn out in the fall, and I'm also looking forward to our discussions when the season starts. So, again, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. This was nice. Should be a pretty exciting year this year. So, yeah, thanks for having me on the show, and good luck with your future ones.
All right, thanks, man. Take care.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
All right, folks, we are closing in on the end of another episode. Our question of the day and mid-watch segments are coming up, so please stick around. Thanks for hanging with us as we approach the final turn here. It is time for our question of the day. So let's go ahead and look back at the one from our last episode. You may recall that we were discussing the Navy rowing program, and the question is pretty straightforward. It was simply, how many IRA championships has the Navy heavyweight rowing team won? Is it A, 7, B, 9, C, 11, or D, 13? Now, I want to say right now that I owe you guys a huge apology because I got sidetracked when publishing the last episode, and somehow I never actually posted the question to the group Facebook page, which of course meant that none of you had the opportunity to answer. So all I can do is provide the correct response, which in and of itself is a little bit confusing. I show that Navy won 11 IRA championships, with 1984 being the last one. But the Mids are also in the record books in 1992 as co-champions with Penn and Dartmouth. In that championship race, it was Harvard who actually won, just barely edging out Dartmouth by inches, and the Mids came in 5th, nearly 4 seconds behind third-place finisher Penn. However, Penn filed a protest claiming wake interference from a nearby motorboat, and I'm still not sure how that boosted Navy all the way up to a tie for first considering where they finished, but that's the story. In any case, I had not accounted for that, so the number I came up with for the total number of championships was 11. The record books show 12, counting that 1992 result. So I tell you what, I may have to reach out to Andy Bigelow or Chuck Melcher to find out the details on that. Anyway, let's move on to this week's question, which has to do with football. Blake Horvath finished 2024 with over 1,200 rushing and passing yards in the same season. He was the third Navy quarterback to hit those numbers. Another one was Keenan Reynolds. So the question is, who was the first to accomplish that feat? Was it A, Roger Staubach, B, Chris McCoy, C, Craig Candido, or D, Ricky Dobbs? Go ahead and take some time to think about that, and I absolutely promise I'll get that question up on the Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page. And by the way, you can also send in your answer by texting the show. There have been a handful of you who've used that option in the past, and it works pretty well too, so just look for the link in the show notes. Now it's time to close things out with our Midwatch segment. You may recall that we were following Gia Anderson and Murphy Smith. Both athletes compete on the track and field team. After her strong performance that helped the Mids win the star at the indoor meet in February, Anderson followed that up with a win in the 60-meter hurdles at the Patriot League Indoor Championships. Then she rode that momentum into the outdoor season. Last month at the star meetup at West Point, Anderson won the 200 meters with a time of 24.97. She also picked up a second-place finish in the 100 meters, clocking in at 11.96, just behind her teammate Annie Lemelin. Anderson's last two events of the meet were both first-place finishes. The first was in the 100-meter hurdles, where she clocked a time of 14.02, just about a hundredth of a second ahead of Lemelin. And then finally, she helped the 4x100-meter relay team post a win over the Black Knights as the women took the star for the 10th consecutive year. And at the Patriot League Championships that just concluded this past weekend, Anderson racked up 26 points, which was good enough to lead all athletes at the competition. She crossed the finish line first in the 100 meters with a time of 11.76. And then she won a second straight championship in the 100-meter hurdles by posting a time of 13.73 in that race. And then finally, Anderson anchored the 4x100-meter relay team to a second-place finish, barely getting edged out by Boston University. It was a terrific season for Anderson, and she'll return for her senior year as she continues to establish herself as one of the best track and field athletes we've ever seen at Navy. She currently owns 9 of the top 10 times in the 60-meter hurdles, including the first 8. And she also owns the best 200-meter indoor time in program history. And if you look at her performance in these outdoor Patriot League championships that just finished up, Anderson looks ready to make her presence felt even more next year. Okay, now let's check in with Murphy Smith. Going back to the Patriot League Indoor Championships in March, Murphy finished second in the 3,000 meters, and then he won the 5,000 with a time of 14:04.85. During the outdoor season, Smith again won the 5,000 meters at the Army Star Meet, and at the Patriot League Championships, he took first in the 10,000 meters with a time of 30 minutes, 56.08 seconds. And the next day, he followed that up with a second-place finish in the 5,000 meters, which I mentioned earlier in the sports update. So Smith, who is a senior from Charlotte, North Carolina, wraps up his Navy track career in style as the Patriot League champion in the 5,000 meters indoors and the 10,000 meters outdoors. He also owns the two best 10,000 meter times in program history. That's going to do it for this edition of Navy Sports Central. Thank you all so much for joining us. Now, if you like what you've heard, please be sure to hit that follow button wherever you get your podcasts, and remember to get the word to all the other Navy fans out there. Once again, I'd like to thank my brother James Darden for joining me today to talk some Navy football. We are both looking forward to what could be another strong season for the Mids next year. Our question of the day continues to be a show favorite. You can get in on that by joining the Navy Sports Nation Group Facebook page and giving your answer to this week's question. You can also respond by sending us a text. All you need to do is click on the link in the show notes. And just a quick reminder, the views expressed on Navy Sports Central are my own and do not reflect those of the U.S. Naval Academy or Navy Athletics. By the way, the music used in Navy Sports Central comes to you courtesy of Audio Jungle. This is a great site for purchasing the rights to use the music from thousands of artists around the world, and those featured in the podcast will be credited in our show notes. Talk to you soon, everybody. Until next time, this is Carl Darden. Go Navy, beat Army.